hurt you unless you choke on it.
Ashley Hodge, one of the great partners of 365 Sports and SicEm365.com, college basketball analyst. Ashley, I'm going to make it blunt. What in the hell happened Saturday, and can Baylor recover?
Boy, it was a shock, just because they had been playing so well, and that second half was something else. Kendall Count and I do a podcast together, and he pointed out that Baylor gave up 1.72 points per possession in the second half, which he said was equivalent to intentionally fouling an 86% free throw shooter every single time down court. So that just kind of shows how terrible that run was, that Kansas ends up scoring 34 points in the first 10 minutes of the second half. And you just can't play defense like that. I am optimistic they're going to right the ship. I don't think they're going to be a great defensive team this year, but they can certainly be better than what they showed on Saturday. And I think we'll get more of an inspired effort like we saw after the Marquette game. And they played pretty good defense against Gonzaga a few days later, and I'm expecting that against Kansas State tomorrow night.
Ashley, if you really go back and think about that game, because they were shooting so well in the first half, it masked a lot of what was going on, really, right? They only had one turnover the entire game, and it was very, very early on. So they were not playing good defense in the first half either. Kansas just wasn't making shots. And then when that flipped, it kind of exposed what was really going on in that first half.
Yeah, I don't know the one. I think Kansas ended up with 4 turnovers on the day, but that's pathetic. You have to force more turnovers than that, especially in a game that could be for the Big 12 championship. You just have to play with more aggression and intention. I will say that there's a little bit of conspiracy theorist in me, I have to admit, and I do think there were some early cheap fouls on Baylor. And that sets the tone. It lets their, Flo Thamba and Jonathan Chalmers-Chatchwell know that you have to be really careful or we're going to call, cheap fouls on you. So I think that maybe led to a lack of aggression, but still no excuse. You have 20 fouls to use at that center position if you include Flo, Jonathan, Josh and Caleb. So I think that, the fact that maybe they became passive is on them versus the officials. But yeah, you hope that going forward there's going to be a lot more aggression, and even if it means more fouls and sending the other team to the foul line more, you just have to have that down the stretch. The competitive will wasn't there in the second half, and that's not Baylor basketball as we know it, and certainly not what we've come to expect the last 4 years.
Scott Drew can make anything look good, smell good, feel good, even in the worst of times. Did he do that Saturday evening in any way?
Yeah, I'm hearing that the players, the film watch was brutal, the second half especially, and I've heard they've responded really well, and I think there's a lot of accountability going on and not a lot of finger pointing, and I think there's a big buy-in from the team, and they're embarrassed, and I don't expect you'll see anything close to that from a repeat performance. If they play like they're capable of offensively, what they've shown in the last month or so, and if they can, play much more inspired defense, it's effort, it's will, it's making sure you take pride in keeping your man from getting to the rim. It's giving hard fouls at the rim, not trying to hurt somebody, but certainly sending a message that we're not going to give you a cheap layup, and maybe they think they think twice about getting all the way to the rim if you do that. It's kind of old school mentality, but I think that's what Baylor needs.
Do you think?
Yeah, because there were one after another uncontested layups and dunks in that second half. It was right. Hard to watch.
With John back now, and he's obviously been more of an offensive force than the defensive force you kind of expect, and that's because he's got to get stronger laterally and more confident and all that. Do you think that we will eventually see, and it could be late in March, some of that defensive ability come back to him, because that's what his real natural gift is in this game?
Yeah, I do. I think he's going to get better defensively. I think that I think that our players understand that. I heard, a former player told them before a game, says you have a Final Four offense, but you got a first-round exit defense. The team knows all this. They just have to realize that there's no room for error going forward. I mean, they put themselves in a position now where to win the Big 12, they absolutely have to win the next 4, and they also need some help. They're going to need Kansas to lose either tonight against TCU or against Texas, and they'll also need Texas to trip up in another game, because both those teams are one game ahead of them in the win and loss column. I think those are all possible things because everybody's still playing each other. But Kansas isn't going to lose at home to West Virginia and Texas Tech. Let's be real. So I mean, they may lose one of the two to TCU and Texas. So if you want to win the Big 12 if you're Baylor, you have to win the next 4, and that obviously starts with a really difficult place to win, and that's Manhattan, Kansas, as well as Coach Tang has been playing this year, but they have been beaten there. Texas beat them, and so Baylor hopes to avoid the sweep and return the favor for what they did in Waco.
Ashley, you followed the program as closely as anybody, and there was a off season of extreme buzz, and here they are. They're just a game back of the Big 12 and the best league in America. But what's been better, maybe what's been worse versus your expectations heading into this season now that we're starting to get closer to March?
I knew the offense would be good, but I mean they're number 2 in offensive efficiency right now, neck and neck with Gonzaga. But I do think, just based on who they play, I think they have the best offense in the country. I think they've proven that in a lot of games against high-level competition. But the defense is not nearly as good as I thought it would be. I expected Keontae George to have his struggles defensively. I knew that, Adam Flagler and LJ Cryer are a little bit undersized, although I do think they give effort on the defensive end. I knew Jalen Bridges would be a good defender. But I'm just disappointed overall that the defense isn't better. I think that we've had too many lapses, obviously Marquette and early on in conference play, and certainly, the second half against Kansas. Looked like we were turning a corner until that, but that was a pretty bad half of basketball. I mean, it's Kansas. It's, it can snowball. They're in transition. They're a great team. So, maybe it's an anomaly. We'll see the next 4 games. But I would say overall the offense is a little better and the defense is not nearly as good as I thought it would be.
No, it's had some moments. The Marquette game was almost like you had to go take a shower. I'm sure that they did too. So, Ashley, there's 4 left, and they have Texas coming up. Obviously, a tough game. Trying to get one back from Jerome Tang in Kansas State tomorrow night in Manhattan. Texas game sold out. The Iowa State game, I think the next Saturday, is an 11 o'clock tip. That's been put out. What is right now, if the tournament started today, where would you think Baylor's ceiling is?
Oh, they're definitely a Final Four capable team. I think they have – I believe in this staff. I think it's the best staff in college basketball. I think they've proven that, the last 4 years that they – with their record. I mean, let's put things in perspective. The game against Kansas, as bad as that was their 20th loss in the last 4 years, playing in the toughest conference in college basketball. Kansas has more losses than that the last 4 years. I mean, that's just an incredible stat. So I do think that, this staff will make the adjustments needed. We'll have Baylor playing great basketball if they can stay healthy. If this team is healthy, they're absolutely a capable Final Four team. They can get beat. I mean, they've proven that, but they're losing to good teams. They're losing to top 15 teams, so it's not like they're losing to teams that you're going to play the first weekend. It's more teams that you would play in that Sweet 16 weekend. And they've also shown they're capable of beating those types of teams as well. So I'm very bullish on the future of Baylor basketball despite the second half performance, and I think they'll respond really well in Manhattan tomorrow night.
What are the most notable differences between the K-State team that upset them a few weeks back and the one that they're going to be facing tomorrow on the road?
Their offensive efficiency is really taken a big hit. I mean, they're still playing terrific defense, and they eked out a really hard-fought win against Iowa State in what was a rock fight, 61-55 on Saturday. I was actually watching that game on the plane before I watched the Baylor-Kansas game. The first half on the plane at least. But I think the big thing for them is, they rely so heavily on Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. They play them almost 40 minutes a game. And I think those guys are starting to wear down a little bit. They have other good players, Sills and Tomlin are really good. And obviously Masood killed us with that clutch three at the end of the game in overtime. So I mean, it's not like they don't have players, but I think they rely so heavily on Noel and Johnson that if Baylor can do a good job containing them and maybe forcing them below their normal efficiency offensively, I think if Baylor scores 70, it's a good chance that they win this game.
Did you see the seedings released of where everybody is? KU 1 seed, Texas, Baylor a 2 seed, Iowa State, K-State a 3 seed. Did you agree with how that was set up?
Yeah, I thought it was really fair, and obviously a tremendous amount of respect for the Big 12, which the Big 12 has earned. And I think that at this point, Baylor, if they win out, if they win the next 7 games, they're going to be a 1 seed. But if they end up, a 2 seed, that would be terrific. Certainly a 3 seed is highly possible as well. But they're probably going to fall on that 2 or 3 line most likely, which, is a great place to be, but to make a deep run. But you certainly want to try to get as high as possible, because it's like 40% of the number 1 seed make it to the Final Four. And those numbers start dropping with every, seed you go down. Your opponents are tougher, and it makes a lot of sense. But if you can get to that 1 line, that would be awesome.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate your time and for allowing us to do this show. Ashley Hodge. Yes, sir. 365 Sports, one of the partners, Colt Barber, Brian Etheridge, Ashley Hodge with us. Of course, the founders.